Last Tuesday at exactly 9:14 a.m. my daughter-in-law called me and said, "Evelyn, Daniel and I have decided we're moving into your lake house. If you have a problem with that, maybe it's time you found somewhere else to retire." No hello. No small talk. Just a declaration. For a moment I honestly thought I'd misheard her. I was standing barefoot on my dock, coffee in hand, watching the mist rise off the water. The loons were calling to each other across the lake like they always do at sunrise. It was peaceful. Quiet. I'm sorry, I said carefully. You heard me, she replied, her voice sharp and certain. It's too big for one person. We'll take the master bedroom. You can move into one of the guest rooms. In my own house. The house I paid for. In cash. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, "I'll think about it," and hung up. Then I stood there for a long time staring at the water, feeling something settle deep in my chest. Not fear. Not sadness. Resolve. Let me back up. My name is Evelyn Carter. I'm 64 years old. I retired 4 months ago after 39 years as a financial analyst. 39 years of alarm clocks at 4:45 a.m., business suits that never quite fit right, skipped vacations, and late nights staring at spreadsheets while everyone else went home to their families. I was good at what I did. Careful. Precise. Every bonus. Every overtime hour. Every dollar I didn't spend on something frivolous. It all went toward one dream. The lake house. 2.5 acres of quiet in northern Wisconsin. 3 bedrooms. 2 bathrooms. A wide cedar deck facing the water. Pine trees framing the shoreline like something out of a painting. I paid $312,000 for it in March. No mortgage. No debt. Just the reward for a lifetime of discipline. For the first time in decades I wasn't surviving. I was living. I woke up with the sun. I read novels on the dock. I baked bread just because I could. I heard my own thoughts again. And then Rebecca decided she wanted it. Rebecca is my daughter-in-law. 33 years old. Married to my son Daniel for 7 years. She used to work in marketing until she pivoted into what she calls entrepreneurial ventures. Translation: she hasn't had steady income in over 2 years. When I told Daniel about buying the lake house, he hugged me. Told me I deserved it. Rebecca smiled. But her eyes didn't. They narrowed just slightly, like she was running numbers in her head. I ignored it. That was my first mistake. In April she started making comments. 3 bedrooms for one person? That's spacious. Isn't it lonely out there all by yourself? It must be expensive to maintain a place like that. Little things. Harmless on the surface. But repetitive. By May the concern turned heavier. I just worry about you being isolated at your age. At some point it might not be safe. Safe. That word again and again. Daniel started echoing her concerns. "Mom, are you sure you're okay up there alone?" "I'm perfectly fine," I told him. "I've handled billion-dollar portfolios. I think I can handle a lawnmower." But Rebecca wasn't worried about my safety. She was building a narrative. And that phone call last Tuesday? That wasn't a suggestion. It was a move. After I hung up, I sat on the dock and replayed every conversation in my mind. The pattern was obvious. I spent nearly 4 decades identifying financial risk, hidden liabilities, long-term exposure. And I was looking at one right now. This wasn't about family bonding. It was about control. About access. About an asset with no mortgage and no debt. My asset. Later that afternoon she called again. "We've been thinking," she said. "Daniel and I could help you maintain the property. You won't have to be alone anymore." "I like being alone," I replied. "That's not healthy for someone your age." There was the subtle implication. My age. "You could move into the guest room," she continued smoothly. "We'd need the master. Eventually when you slow down, it'll make sense for us to already be established there." I felt something cold slide down my spine. Established there. Like I was temporary. Like my life had an expiration date. "Rebecca," I said quietly, "this house is not up for negotiation." She laughed. Actually laughed. "Well, we'll see about that." And that was the moment I knew. She wasn't asking. She was planning. And she had no idea she had just declared war on the wrong retired woman. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was afraid. But as I was thinking. You don't spend nearly 4 decades assessing financial risk without learning one critical rule. When someone starts laying emotional groundwork around money, they're not improvising. They're executing a plan. By Wednesday morning, I'd made 2 decisions. First, I would document everything. Second, I would not confront her until I knew exactly what she was trying to do. At 10:07 a.m. Rebecca called again. "I've been researching," she began without greeting. "Lake properties like yours are extremely profitable as short-term rentals. We could easily generate 6,000 or 7,000 a month during peak season." There was not concern. Revenue projections. "I didn't buy a business," I replied calmly. "I bought a home." "You're being selfish," she snapped. "That place just sits there while Daniel and I are struggling." Struggling. Interesting choice of word. Struggling how? I asked gently. Pause. "Well, it's just hard right now. The economy. Opportunities are tight." Rebecca had always been vague when it came to specifics. It was something I'd noticed years ago. When someone avoids numbers, there's usually a reason. "I'm not turning my retirement home into an Airbnb," I said firmly. "You're wasting potential," she shot back. "We could build something meaningful. A brand. A family business." "And where would I fit into this brand?" Another pause. "You'd still live there, obviously," she said quickly. "At least for now. At least for now." That phrase lingered in my ears long after she hung up. By noon, I had installed a call recording app on my phone. Wisconsin is a one-party consent state. If I'm part of the conversation, I can legally record it. And I intended to. By Friday, she called 5 more times. Each call slightly more aggressive. "You don't need that much space. You're isolating yourself. Daniel says you've been forgetful lately." Forgetful. I nearly laughed. I still balance my own investment accounts down to the cent. But I could see what she was doing. She was laying a foundation. If you want to discredit someone later, you start by planting subtle doubt. On Saturday morning, my sister Margaret called. "Evelyn," she said hesitantly, "Rebecca mentioned she's worried about you. She said you've been confused." "Confused how?" "She said you've made some questionable financial decisions." I stared at the lake in front of me. Crystal clear water. Still as glass. "I bought a house with cash after retiring debt-free," I said. "If that's questionable, I'll accept the charge." Margaret hesitated. She just sounded so concerned. "Yes," I said softly. "I'm sure she did." After I hung up, my hands weren't shaking. But my mind was racing. She wasn't just pushing to move in. She was constructing a narrative that I was no longer capable of managing my own affairs. And that was dangerous. Very dangerous. By Monday afternoon, I had my answer as to why. Because Rebecca made a mistake. She called while Daniel was at work and she was furious. "I can't believe you told him no again," she snapped. "I don't owe you a yes. You're sitting on an asset that could change our lives. Do you know how much equity you're wasting?" Equity. There was again. Not family. Not safety. Equity. "How much debt are you in, Rebecca?" I asked quietly. Silence. "Then, that's none of your business. You're making it my business." She exhaled sharply. "We've had some setbacks." "How much?" "Stop interrogating me." I didn't raise my voice. "I will not surrender my home to solve financial problems I didn't create." "You'd rather let your own son struggle?" she accused. "If Daniel is struggling, he can talk to me directly." "You're unbelievable," she hissed. "After everything we've done for you." That line again. "Be specific," I said. "We include you in holidays. We visit. We make time for you. You invite me to bring dessert and pay for wine," I replied evenly. "That's not charity. That's family." She hung up. But I had the recording. And in it, for the first time, her mask slipped completely. No gentle concern. No worried daughter-in-law. Just calculation. That evening, Daniel finally called. "Mom, Rebecca says you've been acting strange." "Strange how?" "She says you sound different. Defensive." I leaned back in my chair. "Daniel," I said carefully, "when was the last time I forgot something important? Mixed up a date? Made a reckless financial decision?" He hesitated. "Well, never." "Then ask yourself why someone would want you to believe otherwise." Long silence. "Mom, she's just stressed." "So am I." Another pause. She says you don't want us there because you don't trust her. I looked around my living room, sunlight streaming through the windows reflecting off the hardwood floors I paid for. She's right about that, I said quietly. And that was when the line went very, very still. Because I wasn't guessing anymore. I was connecting dots. And the picture forming in front of me was much bigger than a spare bedroom. After that call with Daniel, I did what I probably should have done the moment Rebecca first mentioned my age. I called an attorney. Her name is Patricia Lawson. Mid-40s. Sharp, composed, the kind of woman who listens more than she talks, which I respect. I'd worked with her years ago when I updated my will. When she picked up, I didn't sugarcoat anything. Patricia, hypothetically, I began, if someone were trying to build a case that I'm mentally unfit to manage my own finances, what would that look like? There was a pause. That doesn't sound hypothetical, she said. So I told her everything. The comments about isolation. The repeated mentions of forgetfulness. The pressure to move into the guest room. The Airbnb revenue projections. The equity. And then I told her about Rebecca suggesting I might not be safe living alone. Patricia didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she exhaled slowly. Evelyn, what you're describing is a classic setup for a competency challenge. The words hit harder than I expected. What? If someone can convince enough people that you're cognitively declining, they can petition the court to assign a guardian or conservator. Often a family member. And then, they can gain control over major financial decisions. Property sales. Asset management. Medical choices. My stomach turned. You think she'd go that far? I don't know, Patricia said carefully. But I do know this. People under financial pressure can justify extreme actions. Financial pressure. The phrase echoed. Do you know their debt situation? She asked. No, I admitted. Daniel's always been private about money. Find out, she said. And in the meantime document everything. Every call. Every text. And I strongly recommend you get a formal cognitive evaluation. Proactively. I almost laughed. I just retired from managing multi-million-dollar portfolios. And that will work in your favor, she replied. But documentation beats reputation every time. By Thursday, I had an appointment scheduled with a neuropsychologist in Madison. If Rebecca wanted to hint at dementia, I'd hand her a 12-page medical report proving otherwise. That same afternoon, something happened that shifted this from suspicious to undeniable. My security cameras pinged my phone. Motion detected, front driveway. I was at the grocery store. I pulled up the live feed. Rebecca's SUV. And a man I didn't recognize. They weren't just standing there. They were walking the perimeter of my property. Peering into windows. Testing the latch on the side gate. The man had a clipboard. I zoomed in. He was measuring the deck. My pulse slowed, not from panic but from focus. When I got home they were gone. I called her immediately. Were you on my property today? I asked calmly. I stopped by, she said lightly. I was in the area. With a man taking measurements? Oh, that. Just a friend curious about Lake Holmes. A friend with a clipboard? Silence. Then, you're being paranoid. I have cameras, Rebecca. Another silence. Longer this time. So what if I did? She snapped finally. It's a valuable property. I was exploring options. For what? For the future, she said sharply. Whether you like it or not. There was again. The future. Without me clearly included in it. After we hung up, I called Patricia. Within an hour, she'd run the license plate from the footage. The friend was a licensed real estate appraiser. Rebecca had attempted to get my property evaluated without my consent. For what purpose? Market value. Leverage. Court documents. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the lake and something settled in my chest. This wasn't emotional. It was strategic. And strategy is something I understand very well. That evening Daniel called again. His voice sounded tired. Mom, Rebecca said you accused her of spying on you. She trespassed with an appraiser. She said she was planning ahead. For what? I asked quietly. Silence. Then I said the one question I'd been holding back. Daniel, are you in debt? The air on the other end of the line changed. We've had some setbacks, he admitted. How much? I don't know exactly. That answer told me everything. You don't know, I repeated slowly. She handles most of it, he said defensively. She's better at managing that stuff. I closed my eyes. Daniel, my brilliant, kind-hearted son, who once double-checked math homework 3 times, had handed over full financial control. Daniel, I said gently, have you personally reviewed your retirement account recently? Pause. No. Have you checked your credit report this year? Another pause. No. The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was heavy, like something dawning. Mom, what are you implying? I'm implying, I said carefully, that before you question my competency, you might want to verify your own accounts. He didn't argue. He didn't defend her. He just said very quietly, okay. And for the first time since this started, I felt the ground shift. Not in Rebecca's favor. In mine. Because if she was desperate enough to trespass, desperate enough to start whispering about dementia, desperate enough to push Daniel to question me, then she was hiding something much bigger than a desire for extra square footage. And I was about to find out exactly what it was. The cognitive evaluation took nearly 3 hours. Memory recall, pattern recognition, financial reasoning exercises, verbal comprehension, even abstract problem solving. At one point, the doctor slid a complex scenario across the desk involving investment reallocations during a market downturn. I smiled. Would you like my conservative strategy or my aggressive one? I asked. She smiled back. When we finished, she folded her hands and said, Evelyn, your cognitive performance is above average for your age group. There are no indicators of dementia, impairment, or diminished financial capacity. I let out a slow breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Hypothetically, I asked, if someone were suggesting otherwise? He gave me a knowing look. Then they either misunderstand cognitive decline, or have motives unrelated to your health. I left with a 12-page report stamped, signed, and legally airtight. And I had a feeling I would need it. 3 days later, Daniel showed up at the Lakehouse unannounced. He looked exhausted. Older than his 36 years. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place he used to do homework when he was little, and he slid a folder toward me. I checked the accounts, he said quietly. Inside were printed bank statements, credit card balances, loan notices, and something worse. She took out a $32,000 loan against my retirement account, he whispered. 6 months ago. My chest tightened. Did you sign for it? She told me it was paperwork to adjust beneficiary details. I signed electronically. I didn't read the fine print. And the credit cards? His jaw clenched. Over $81,000. I closed my eyes for a moment. 81,000. That wasn't setbacks. That was collapse. There's more, he said, voice breaking slightly. She applied for 2 additional cards in my name. I only found out when one was declined and I got an alert. Identity misuse. Potential fraud. The pieces weren't just falling into place anymore. They were locking together. Daniel, I said gently, did she ever mention using the Lakehouse as collateral? He looked up sharply. She talked about refinancing opportunities. Said once we were living there we could leverage the property to reset everything. Leverage. Of course. My paid-off home wasn't just shelter to her. It was liquidity. And if she could position me as mentally unstable, she could argue that Daniel needed to step in for my protection. Guardianship, asset control, property sale, or forced refinance. All legally framed as concern. Daniel's hands were shaking. I didn't know, he kept repeating. I didn't know. I believe you, I said quietly. And I did. Daniel had always trusted too easily. It's a beautiful quality until someone weaponizes it. That evening Rebecca called him. I could hear her through the speaker. Why are you at your mother's house? She demanded. I needed to talk to her. You're letting her manipulate you. Daniel's voice changed then. Firmer. Did you take money from my retirement account? Silence. Then, we needed it. You told me it was paperwork. You would have panicked. So you forged my consent? It's our money, she snapped. And that house is just sitting there. Do you know how much income we could generate? Thousands every month. There was again. Income. Revenue. Not mom's well-being. Not family unity. Cash flow. Daniel's face went pale as he listened. You've been telling people she's losing her memory, he said slowly. I was worried. No, he said. You were laying groundwork. The silence on the other end of the call was chilling. Then her voice dropped. You're choosing her over me? I'm choosing facts, he replied. She hung up. Daniel sat there staring at the table. I feel stupid, he said finally. No, I said softly. You feel betrayed. There's a difference. The next week moved quickly. Patricia filed formal documentation reinforcing my legal autonomy, including the cognitive evaluation. We placed my property into a revocable trust with strict language preventing any transfer without my explicit notarized consent and independent medical verification of capacity. Bulletproof. Rebecca meanwhile escalated. She contacted an attorney about contesting my mental fitness. That attorney declined to proceed without medical evidence. She didn't have any. Because it didn't exist. Then came the mistake that ended everything. Daniel checked their joint email archive. He found messages between Rebecca and her sister. Detailed discussions about the Lakehouse plan. About slowly convincing Daniel I was declining. About pushing for cohabitation to establish residency leverage. About eventually refinancing. One message read, once we're legally in the master bedroom, it'll be easier to argue she needs help managing things. I felt physically cold when he showed me that. This wasn't impulsive. It was premeditated. Calculated. Layered. Daniel looked at me with tears in his eyes. I'm filing for divorce, he said quietly. And for the first time since this began, I didn't feel defensive. I didn't feel angry. I felt steady. Because I hadn't overreacted. I hadn't lashed out. I had documented. Prepared. Practiced. And now the truth was unfolding without me having to destroy anyone. Rebecca didn't lose because I attacked her. She lost because she underestimated me. And she underestimated the power of evidence. But it wasn't over yet. Because desperate people don't go quietly. Desperate people don't go quietly. And Rebecca was nothing if not desperate. 2 days after Daniel told her he was filing for divorce, she showed up at the Lakehouse. Unannounced. I saw her car through the front windows before she even reached the door. I didn't panic. I pressed record on my phone and opened it. She didn't look polished the way she usually did. No carefully applied smile. No composed posture. Her mascara was smudged and her jaw was tight. You've ruined my marriage, she said before I could speak. No, I replied calmly. Your choices did. You turned him against me. I showed him documentation. She stepped closer. You think you've won? I held her gaze. This was never a competition. It is to me, she snapped. Do you have any idea what it feels like to watch opportunity just sit there while your life collapses? Opportunity. Not home. Not family. Opportunity. You mean my house? I asked. You don't need it, she cried. You're one person. You sit here alone while Daniel and I drown in bills. That property could have saved us. There was the truth stripped of strategy. You were going to refinance it, I said evenly. Maybe sell it. Use it to patch debt you created. She didn't deny it. Instead she said something far more telling. You're going to die eventually. What difference would it make if we started using it now? For a split second the air felt thin. Not because I was hurt. Because she had finally said the quiet part out loud. I studied her face, searching for shame. There wasn't any. Just entitlement. I am not an obstacle to your financial plan, I said quietly. And my life is not a waiting room for your inheritance. Her eyes flashed. You're selfish. No, I said calmly. I'm self-respecting. That word seemed to sting her more than anything else. Behind her anger I could see something unraveling. Control slipping. Daniel had frozen their joint accounts. He'd filed fraud reports on the retirement withdrawal. An attorney was reviewing the forged digital authorizations. Her leverage was disappearing. And she knew it. You think you're better than me, she said bitterly. I think I worked for what I have. Silence stretched between us. The lake behind me was calm. So reflective. I realized something in that moment. I wasn't fighting her anymore. I was standing. And that was enough. You should leave, I said gently. She stared at me for a long time, like she was searching for guilt to exploit, fear to grab onto. She didn't find any. Eventually she turned and walked back to her car. That was the last time I saw her. The legal aftermath moved quickly. Once Daniel formally reported the unauthorized retirement withdrawal and credit activity, investigators uncovered additional applications she'd submitted in his name. The divorce proceedings accelerated. Fraud nullified portions of their financial agreements. Restraining orders were put in place after Patricia presented the documented attempts to undermine my competency. Rebecca didn't go to prison, but she did face charges, repayment plans, and a record that will follow her for years. Consequences. Not revenge. Consequences. 6 weeks later, Daniel came back to the Lakehouse. But this time he wasn't exhausted. He looked lighter. Like someone who had stepped out of a fog. We sat on the dock as the sun began to set, the sky turning orange and pink over the water. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not seeing it sooner. For doubting you. You were trying to hold your marriage together," I told him. "That's not weakness." He nodded, staring at the water. "She kept saying you were declining. That you didn't realize how lonely you were. That you needed us." "And what do you think now?" I asked. He looked around, the trees, the dock, the quiet lake. "I think you look exactly where you're meant to be." I smiled. As I was. We grilled fish that night. Laughed more than we had in months. Talked about his plans to move closer. Not into my home but into his own place an hour away. Healthy distance. Healthy boundaries. Healthy respect. Later, after he left, I sat alone on the dock. The loons called across the water again. The same sound that had filled my mornings before any of this started. And I realized something important. I never set out to destroy Rebecca. I never plotted revenge. I didn't scream. I didn't retaliate recklessly. I documented. I prepared. I protected what I built. And sometimes that's all it takes. People will call you selfish for having boundaries. They'll call you paranoid for protecting yourself. They'll call you cold for refusing to be manipulated. But here's what I've learned. You do not spend 40 years building security just to hand it over to someone who believes they deserve it more than you. Family is not ownership. Love is not leverage. And retirement is not a pre-inheritance distribution event. I look around this house now, the one I earned, the one I defended, and I don't feel victorious. I feel peaceful. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can say isn't yes. It's no. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's refusing to move out of your own master bedroom.